You have the manufacturing space that's being affected by robotics. You have the construction space that's being affected by robotics. Then you can go into the agriculture space. Now you can take a 100-watt laser and shoot that weed and kill the weed.
Robots and lasers in farming.
We're living in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jared.
Hi, I'm Melinda.
And welcome back to The Secret Life of Inventory. This is a show where we dive deep into the unseen world of inventory management, and we uncover the hidden mysteries that help businesses like you optimize their workflow and succeed.
Today's guest is one of the most recognized voices in modernizing manufacturing. Let's welcome Jake Hall, who's better known as the Manufacturing Millennial. With 20 years of experience working with both Fortune 100 companies and small manufacturers, Jake has built an audience of over 100,000 professionals and has gained more than 150 million views by showing how modern factories actually run.
From factory floors to high school robotics programs, Jake has helped businesses boost their operational efficiencies and implement automation. His expertise spans between hands-on manufacturing roles and more strategic brand planning and keynote speaking, so he is the perfect blend between technical knowledge and storytelling, which helps bridge the gaps between industries and generations.
So if you're curious about automation and how you can level up your workforce strategy, this episode is for you. Jake, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Man. Thanks for having me. What an intro so far. That was awesome. That was awesome. It's great to be here. Great to be here in the city of Toronto, back in Canada. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
So Jake, can you take us back to where it started? How did you get into the world of manufacturing and automation?
Yeah, I would say really from manufacturing, it took off for me when I was a sophomore in high school. I started off as a shop boy, or I guess you could say broom kid for a manufacturing facility. It was one of those things. I was looking for a summer job, and my father had some friends that were in the industry and said, "Hey, put my son to work." And for me, it was a great experience for me because growing up, I always enjoyed Lego. I enjoyed erector sets. I enjoyed taking the old Lego Mindstorm sets and programming them, moving them around as a robot on a playing map. And I was involved in the high school robotics program, US First. We'll cover a lot more of that later on. But for me, it was one of those things in high school, being able to see how machines were beginning to be built, how custom automation, getting really my first experience seeing an industrial robot on the floor, moving parts around.
Yeah.
It was really exciting for me, and having that experience in high school was awesome. And from there, it was one of those things where the next step for me was then after high school, I went to college. I got a mechanical engineering degree and a manufacturing engineering degree from Grand Valley State University. And, from there, it was really just continuing to go into workforce. So that's really how things kicked off for me.
Awesome. So, you've worked with like huge, big companies as well as like smaller ones. Mm-hmm. So if you can kind of walk us through maybe like a project you worked on with one of these larger companies, like what kind of automation system you helped them implement and like kind of what like challenge it helped to kind of solve or problem, I guess.
I'll share one unique that's towards really this great combination of automation and human labor. Mm-hmm. So in Michigan, there is a 10-cent demanded deposit on recycling pop cans and bottles. So in Michigan, millions and millions and millions of cans are recycled. They're brought to either a Meijer or a Walmart convenience store. They're put in there, and then they come back in basically these automotive tote bins. And then they're brought to a facility, then be recycled and processed. There's a company in Michigan called Shoe Pan Recycling. And they had a massive labor shortage issue where they had a hard time keeping a person on the floor, on the processing floor for more than a couple weeks at a time. Right? Imagine you're in on a factory floor and you are in 105, I guess in Fahrenheit here. English is, 100. You convert that, down below into Celsius. But 100 degrees inside this facility. It's smelly. It's sticky. You're working with weeks old spilt beer. It's right. You remember going to college and then you had to wake up the next morning and just didn't smell good.
Yeah.
Imagine this, but just 24/7. So the conditions really were not great for workers. So the company said, okay, how can we really take these manual processes and leverage automation where we're not completely removing the worker from the process. We're just taking that really dark, dirty, dangerous, smelly, disgusting point out of it. So we helped them go in there and take a lot of these processes that were really done by human operators, taking off the bin that was being shipped in the container and then folding down and breaking the bin to eventually be pushed in the washer. All that stuff was at one point in time manual. And it had a big turnover rate. So for us, we went in there and we found out how we can implement 5, 6 large, 200 kg payload robots, some really big industrial robots the size of this room. You know, they would be above this room if all the axes were pointing straight up. And from there, it was great to understand why they're not just automating because they want more profitability, they want more throughput. They realize that the human element into manufacturing has to be something that they look at. If they want to have people who are staying at the company consistently, they got to make and remove those dirty tasks.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we look at why we automate, it's not just about the ROI, it's about the people as well.
Right.
We a lot of times don't look at what the cost could be for training people. How often, how much do companies spend year over year on recruiting, on the onboarding processes, on the retraining? You know, it's one of those things where I looked at when you look at the average first year worker, 27% of their cost is spent into training before, you know, within the first year. So it's imagine now if you have, you know, that turnover every 3 months on some of these really, you know, not enjoyable jobs in manufacturing. You know, that's why we turn to automation. So, you know, that was just a fun one for me where it's one of those things, oftentimes we hear about automation, it's just the big automotive lens. No, this is just a small family owned recycler that's going out there and taking what was a very dark, dirty, dull, dangerous, you know, boring task and automating it. And now you have workers there that are staying there because they're doing the automation. They're learning how to program robots now. They're learning about being leveraged up in their skills, talent, while taking that manual task out of it.
Right. So when you're working with these bigger companies, is there anything you shift when you're actually supporting the smaller companies? Is something that it stays the same, or do you is your approach kind of the same?
You know, it's the same and different. The one thing that really separates small to medium-sized businesses to large businesses is a lot of times the hats that people wear.
Right.
When you look in the United States, 98% of businesses are classified as a small to medium-sized business, which is like under 500 employees. In fact, like 78% of them are considered a small business, which is under 50. When you look at a lot of these small to medium-sized businesses, when companies want to go out there and they want to leverage automation, it's not like they have an entire support team that's out there like the larger companies have when they have an entire digital transformation team of 30 to 40 professionals that can go out there and say, okay, let's look at the IT side of things. Let's look at the OT. Let's figure out what machines we have that are connected right now to a data silo that we can then begin to pull information out of to understand what's happening on the factory floor. A lot of times these small businesses don't have those resources. They're running on equipment that's 30, 40, 50 years old. And so when you're going out there and you're talking with these manufacturers, you need to understand that for them, when they're going out there and they want to implement new automation, new technology, new digital solutions, it's directly pulling them from their day-to-day task.
Right.
Where no longer when that person wants to leverage digital information, they will say, okay, we want to begin to pull more data from this manufacturing process or on the shipping floor or in a logistics company. You know, you're pulling them the labor directly away. So when you're working with these companies, you need to understand that they're going to move at sometimes a slower pace, sometimes a faster pace, but you need to have a much better justification on why they should be moving and leveraging this technology, because they don't have the time like a lot of other companies do to have a specific team and task to just implement new technology.
Okay, well that makes sense.
And especially from the risk perspective, right? You know, when companies are out there, they can throw $1 million at a project for some of those larger companies. And if it doesn't work, they learned from it.
Yeah.
You know,
$1 million lesson.
And for a lot of big companies, that's just one of those things.
Yeah.
You know, the early adopters will get the benefit, but it's a lot higher cost.
Yeah.
Versus, you know, the smaller companies, they can't be making those mistakes.
Yeah. They bankrupt after.
Fold over a business really quickly.
Yeah.
So something you actually touched on just earlier is you were talking about, reskilling, right? So, and you have talk about it a lot on your channel. Every day there's some new AI model or some new, robotics coming out. So like, how would you encourage them to keep reskilling? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that really just dives into, why I started this Manufacturing Millennial channel, so kind of diving into, I come from the industry from 20 years of experience. When the pandemic happened, we were all told to work from home. So
Yeah.
we had to go out and me being in business development at the time, I had to find a new way to communicate to my customers, my audience, the engineers that I'm talking with. So I turned to social media as a way to begin communicating what technologies transform the industry.
Right.
So I had to learn a lot of new tasks. I had to learn how do I edit video? How do I shoot video? Man, you go back to some of the early videos that are on LinkedIn and YouTube, and one of them is literally a setup where I have a broom pole with a piece of cardboard that I duct tape out to make a camera stand, and I had a bunch of old lights that were in a old stand-up lighting that were all tilted at me to be my spotlights and stuff like that. And it was one of those things you were learning how to do things. And so for me, with what I want to do for the Manufacturing Millennials, I want to drive awareness to manufacturers on why we should be adopting new technology in the industry, why we should be getting this next generation excited about working in manufacturing. And a lot of the ways and how we're going to do that is we need to change the perception of what the manufacturing industry has to offer.
Right.
And so as we move away from this dark, dirty, dull, dangerous industry into an industry that has new technologies, the human workforce needs to follow that trend. So while a lot of manufacturers, and I think this goes back, this is a great segue from our conversation of what do you see different from small to medium-sized businesses to large businesses, a lot of times it's the people. So these smaller businesses, they've been doing it the same way for 30 or 40 years. If they want to implement a new automation solution on their floor, if they want to implement a new robot, they need to learn how to then leverage that robot. So that's why it's so important to work with companies on why we need to continue to reskill this next generation. Well, you do have an upcoming generation that's excited about the technology. You have an industry that's been, you have a generation of baby boomers and Gen Xers who've been in the industry already for 20, 25 years, who've been doing it a certain way. And all of a sudden you throw a new PLC at them. You throw a collaborative robot or an industrial robot at them. You throw a vision system on the floor that's automatically doing some automated inspection and some quality inspection. It can be very intimidating to, a new workforce. So the whole goal is we need to help educate why companies need to not only invest in technology, but they need to invest in their existing workforce to retrain them to understand these technologies. And the great part about it is there's so many amazing resources that are out there through associations that have put on trade shows. In the US, we have the Manufacturing Extension Partnerships. We have manufacturing organizations with each individual state that then create grants and information then to give to manufacturers for constant retraining and digital adoption of technology.
A lot of good resources.
Awesome. Yeah.
So going back to your work experience, you must have seen a lot evolve in the 20 years you've been working there. So can you tell us more about the different types of technologies that you've worked with?
The tech is still a lot the same from what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, but the ease of implementation, the cost of robotics is significantly cut.
Right.
And that's why you're seeing more and more companies adopting this automation. That's why more and more companies are picking up collaborative robots because the ease of integration, the ease of use, the cost of implementation. Beforehand, if you wanted to do an end-of-line palletizing project, you would have had to spend $250,000 to do it. Now you can go out there and you can buy a 20 kg payload, 25 kg payload, end-of-line cobot palletizer that already has its own unique software with its own Z-lift vertical stacking for palletizing boxes, and you can walk out the door for $100,000 on your own.
That's crazy. I know that money was a huge factor, and that it's now accessible, which is crazy.
Yeah, and that's the whole part, right? It goes back to, another Canadian company, Vention here. They talk about democratizing automation, right? If we can make it so automation can be easily accessible to the small to medium-sized business, just like the large manufacturers, you're going to see a lot better adoption of automation.
Yeah, I think just saying robot to a small to medium-sized businesses before would be like, come on, I'm not made of money. Like that's got to be,
Absolutely. And you look at, for a lot of them, it would be very intimidating to pick up a robot. You talk about when you don't have, when these older generations have been working in the industry, doing the same exact thing for the last 30 or 40 years. It's intimidating to go out there and say, okay, I'm going to give you this $30, $40, $50,000 robot, do something with it. I don't know how to, but this technology these days is really what's making it exciting.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Was there one system or tool that really surprised you?
I would say the one thing that really blows my mind these days is 3D bin picking.
3D bin picking.
So in the automotive space, a lot of times you have these 4 foot by 4 foot, 1.3 meter, by 1.3 meter size automotive bins that have a lot of times casted parts or machine parts that go in there. An operator that needs to take that part, put it into a machine for a post-processing operation. So a lot of times these parts are casted or forged. They come from that manufacturer, then they go into an area that has to then do subtractive manufacturing or finishing or something like that. You have a very manual task, right? You're working in here, you're picking up very heavy components, reaching down, bending over into a bin, grabbing them, and doing that 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's not fun. So now all of a sudden we can go out there and we can leverage these robotics to go out there and be able to pick a component on its own and for a very low justification as well. You know, the one thing that we always hear about, the stories out there is robots take jobs, automation takes jobs. And you know, you can go back to the 70s and 80s when a lot of manufacturing left the North American region and went over to China and around the APAC area. But now all of a sudden what we're seeing in the 2020s is that automation is not replacing workers. It's enabling workers and companies to be more competitive in the global economy.
Right.
I'll give you an example of just another story that we have is in the fall of every year in October, there's an event that I'll talk more about the organization later on, but there's an event called Discover Manufacturing where we'll bring in thousands of high school students to meet with manufacturers to learn what's happening on the floor. When I was out there, I was touring a machining company, a machine company that was making a bunch of different components for SpaceX, for automotive companies, for the agriculture business. They were pretty diversified. But when I was talking with one of the owners there, he told me a story on how their product that they've been making for the last 20 years went out to bid, and a company overseas in China got it at a lower price. So they were saying, hey, in 6 months, we're going to be moving the product that you've been making for us for the last 20 years overseas. And so, you know, he was an old guy. He's been doing this for 30 or 40 years. He says, I don't know what to do. His son, who was on one of the first robotics teams, said, hey, Dad, you should look at doing robot machine tending. So you go out there, you take a robot, you plug it in the side of the CNC machine. It will open the door, close the door, it will grab the spare parts, load them into the machine. It does the operation, pulls it out, and then puts it in there. They were able to go out and buy 3 or 4 robots, load them into these areas to do automated machine tending and keep that business.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at it, the robots didn't take jobs. Robots enabled that company to stay in business. That was a significant part of their company by staying competitive in the global economy.
Yeah.
So that not only did the robots then keep the business local, they were able to then keep all of the workers there employed and then actually bring on additional workers to help train and program the robots along with then teaching the employees who were already there, sending them to robot training to then get that upskilling that job.
So
a great
it's
example
quite
of,
the opposite then. Creating jobs rather.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, those robots saved that, you know, business that's been in the area for 30 or 40 years, that's employed 20 to 25, you know, employees. They kept in business because that robots allowed that company to do so in a global economy.
It doesn't take jobs; it saves jobs. Yeah.
So you mentioned like that one especially was it's a strenuous job, right? Picking up those pieces. The other job is you mentioned was the labeling thing, and no one wants that job.
Yeah.
So do you find that companies are getting robotics to do the things that people either can't do often or like a lot?
They don't want to do.
Or they don't want to do. Yeah. So is that the area that kind of focusing most of the attention on?
Yeah, you know, robotics, at the end of the day, robotics is an enabler for many different solutions. You know, one of the biggest things that I'm not super knowledgeable on, but I'm aware of is the construction space as well. So right now there's about 500,000, 600,000 open jobs in manufacturing. In the United States, there's like 300,000, 400,000 open jobs in the construction space. So one of those things, right? This next generation of millennials and Gen Zs doesn't want to go outside, work outside all day. So how do these companies who still need to build homes, still need to build sky rises, you know, that as I look out this window here and you have 60, you know, story tall buildings that are making this stuff. Well, then there's companies out there that are enabling robotics to be able to go out there and build these construction things. So you have Dusty, which is an autonomous robot that can travel around on the floor and mark and paint down where all the different plumbing and electrical wire needs to go. So before that was a manual task that would have to look at the dimensions out there. They would go out there with tape and a measure and a wheel stick, and they would mark all these things with paint. Now you can have a robot there that goes out there and does that all autonomously.
That's great.
On its own. You have another company, I think it's Reach Robotics, that goes out there, and when you have these massive skyscrapers, you have the initial concrete foundation, right? That's getting built up, and then you have to then put in all of the metal guarding that will eventually hold the siding, the windows, and all that stuff. A lot of that process is done manually, where you're going to have a worker who's leaning over the side of this 40-story building with a drill in their hand, drilling into this concrete to then put bolts in and then hang the metal brackets that will put that up there. Now we can have robots that will go out there and they're going to hold everything. They're going to drill it off for you. And now you have the human worker that's safely standing behind it and controlling it.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where you have the manufacturing space that's being affected by robotics. You have the construction space that's being affected by robotics. Then you can go into the agriculture space. So now all of a sudden you have robotics out there where you have autonomous robots that are driving down an agricultural field, and they're using AI machine vision to be able to detect what's the difference between a plant that you're growing versus a weed. And then if you see a weed, now you can take a 100-watt laser and shoot that weed and kill the weed.
Robots and lasers in farming.
We're living in the future.
It's very case, but here's the thing though. Now all of a sudden you're not using pesticides. You're not using chemicals that are going on the plant, on the stuff to kill those things.
Yeah, lasers for the win.
Yeah, exactly. So it goes out there is now you have all these technologies that are merging together due to some really cool technology.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one. That's very cool.
Like
It's very sci-fi. Yeah.
But it's happening all over the place. Like you have robots out there that are picking strawberries. That are going through areas. It's really incredible when you see all these technologies, from robotics to machine vision to AI. We'll talk more about the digital space in a minute, all working together. You can see some really cool solutions to technology that are coming out.
Yeah. So you mentioned you worked with more traditional robots and then the newer, more collaborative ones, which I recently learned are called cobots. So what's the difference between the two?
Yeah. So the industrial robot is one of the original robots that came out in the 1960s, 70s. The automotive space was this early adoption. In the, I think, early 2000s, the collaborative robot market came out with really two big leaders. There was Rethink Robotics here in the United States, and then there was Universal Robots that was coming out of Denmark. And the whole idea of the collaborative robot space was being able to create a robot that could work safely alongside of a human, so you didn't have to have all this additional guarding that was around the robot, right? So if you didn't have to put in the guarding, you could have the worker work alongside the robot. It was safer. It meant a lot of times companies could then easier adopt robotics. Going back to that conversation earlier, if you could have companies reduce the risk of adoption, they're more likely going to adopt. So collaborative robots took off really in a couple unique areas. One was the original focus on making work environments safer. And we found out that it kind of worked that way because you'd still have to do a risk assessment, right? You couldn't take a collaborative robot that had a bunch of force torque sensors to basically say, hey, if I pushed up against the robot, that robot would stop, right? Versus an industrial robot, it would just plow you over. So collaborative robot had a bunch of additional safety sensors in there to make it so if it hit a person, it would stop and it wouldn't hurt them.
But seems important.
Exactly. But here's the thing though, if you worked for a company called Bic and Bic razors, and you had a robot that was going out there picking up a bunch of razor blades and swinging them around, just because the robot's safe doesn't mean the application that the robot's working in is safe. So it's one of those things that really wasn't a necessarily safe environment. What collaborative robots really took off was, I would say, the ease of programming. And really what we saw coming from collaborative robots was their teach pen wasn't really the old traditional 40 buttons on a black and white screen that, had pixelated programming interface. It was like an iPad. So you can go out there and you could do drag and drop programming code. Wow. Instead of, the old structured text to be able to set up programming. So all of a sudden you have a generation of us like millennials that are coming up there and say, hey, we played with iPads, growing up. We understand some basic programming. All all of a sudden, when we didn't have to send an engineer to a robotics, training course for 3 weeks, 4 weeks to get certified to learn how to do it, I could watch a YouTube video and learn how to program a robot. That's why collaborative robots took off so much, because the ease of programming, ease of adoption. And they also really focused on really this unified workspace of, I'm going to have a collaborative robot, but I'm going to make sure it's going to work with the gripper that's going to pick up the part. I want to make sure it's going to work with the machine vision system that will identify where that part is. And then if I see it on an area, I know how to go and pick it right away.
Right.
So it really began to take off because at the end of the day, they made an ecosystem that was really easy for all these different components from different manufacturers, from different companies to be able to come in and work together. And then it was really easy to adopt. And that's why we saw the collaborative robot space take off. That's probably why in the last 20 years, we've seen globally probably 250,000 collaborative robots sold.
Can you give us an example of like a collaborative robot? Actually, just I'm kind of curious, like how would that work? Because like on my mind, it's like am I in a mech suit or something like that? You know what I mean?
So a collaborative robot is in a lot of cases, it's a 6-axis arm, just like industrial robots. So you have a robot that's going to move on the base. It's going to have kind of all the same motion of just your typical arm. From I guess you could say your waist that turns, and then you have your shoulder, which would be J2, J3 here, J4, J5, and then J6. So basically six joints of motion. Where you would see collaborative robots is really, I would say, 3 main cases. One is the end of line palletizing that we talked about.
Okay.
I can go out there and I can take a robot, wheel it up right to where a box would be coming down a conveyor or out of a machine, grab them and then stack them onto a pallet and build that pallet up where I don't have to have an operator then standing there all the time, picking up, 20 kg payload, boxes, and then stacking them all day, 8 hours a day. That's going to be exhausting, especially if you're let's say you're in a food production facility and you're doing that inside of a freezer or refrigerator, right? Where right now it sounds nice, but if you're
hypothermia,
how hot it is right now, but if you're working in an area where it's 30 degrees, Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, 8 hours a day, not as fun. Right. So we can see robots begin to do that stuff in the palletizing space. Another example was the machine tending, going out there and being able to go out and grab components off of a tray, load them into a machine to then have subtractive manufacturing to make a finished part. Humans don't have to do that anymore. Another great example is welding. And probably one of the biggest spaces that we're seeing a lot of collaborative robots take off is right now in the United States, but there's about 550,000 welders working in manufacturing. The average age of those welders is 53 or 54 years old.
Oh, wow.
Like very old. In fact, when you look at a majority of like over 40% of the welders in America working in manufacturing are going to retire in the next 10 years. Like it's a significant issue that's going to be facing manufacturing. If I can go out there and I can take a robot and do a lot of these tasks where I can lay down a bead, I could weld a couple of components together. We can go out there and we can take a lot of these dirty, dark tasks that welding has and allow manufacturers to still make these components and weld these components together where you don't have the skills that once was, right? When we were in high school, we had shop class where every kid in high school back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s was learning how to make stuff when they were in high school still. They took all those classes out. So now all of a sudden you have a lot of these kids that don't have the common knowledge of how to do all these things.
Right.
And so that's one of those things. Robotics is coming in. It's finding a gap. It's finding a need in the workforce. And now it's doing a lot of welding. And it's really supporting actually the small to medium-sized businesses. Because what a collaborative robot welder does really well compared to an industrial one is a lot of times industrial robot welding has been around for 50 or 60 years, but it's been the automotive space where you're making hundreds of thousands of the same part year over year over year.
Right.
Versus, hey, you work for a small marine manufacturer that's making props that go on boats. You may be making a couple hundred or 1,000, right? You can't afford to go out and buy a massive industrial automation system that's going to cost millions of dollars. You're never going to get a cost justification for it. But if you can go out there and you can buy a collaborative robot welding solution that can weld this part, this part, this part. So you can weld 5, 10, 15, 20 different parts then all of a sudden your ROI and your justification is a lot closer because it's so much more dynamic and flexible with what we can manufacture.
Right.
Yeah. So if you were to give advice to smaller manufacturers who want to get started with robots or cobots, what would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I would say is go to in-person events, go to trade shows. Trade shows offer so much when it comes to seeing the technology in person, talking to subject matter experts to learn what solutions you would recommend for that. And, so for in the United States and here in Canada, Canada has a CM, Canadian Manufacturing, I think it's CMMS. Don't quote me to it. I'll try and get you the information.
Yeah, and the links down below.
In the description and
all the conferences.
Podcast. But, in the United States, we have FabTech, IMTS, Automate, Pack Expo, Modex, ProMat, a lot of these really good trade shows that are specific to industries where people can come in, see applications in person, can bring their products to the show and say, hey, I need these welded. I need this box this way. What type of equipment, what machines do you have? And then you could talk to 20, 30 different companies who are all offering those type of solutions at once and really get a better understanding of how things are being made, how things are being produced, what technology is available.
Oh, they're very cool.
That's a great
that
advice.
would be the first place I would start. The second place I would start is spend some time on YouTube. It's incredible what resources are available on YouTube these days to be able to go out there and learn how to either program robots on your own, or if you go out there and you say, hey, I have this product, how do I weld it? How do I assemble it? How do I pick and place it, put it together, whatever you're doing with the product? The resources out there are really incredible. So that'd be a couple of my recommendations right away to do that.
Awesome. So, you said that you've been in the industry obviously for a couple decades. What technology is still around? Like what has stood the test of time, and what new things and exciting things have come up in that time?
Yeah, I would say robots, have by far, stood the test of time. The one thing that I would say that we're seeing stand the test of time, but at the same time is changing, is how we're digitally adopting technology in manufacturing. So for a long time, manufacturers on the floor, they would create a piece of custom automation machinery, and they would have a PLC, a programmable logic controller, which would basically be its code on how we make this machine run. For decades, all these individual machines were siloed, where basically we would never know what's actually happening to that machine unless we walked up to that machine, talked to the operator and said, hey, how many parts have you run this hour so far? Have you had any scrap? Have you had any errors? It's still making the components, but what we're seeing changing through that time is more and more companies are wanting better digital information on what's happening on the floor. Right. Because if manufacturers can't act now and they're trying to act from something that happened 2 weeks ago, they're never going to be successful. They're never going to drive productivity moving forward in a competitive base. So we're seeing more companies taking the existing assets that still exist on the manufacturing floor from 30 or 40 years ago, and they're driving digital solutions for this. So basically they're taking the individual equipment on the floor that's siloed, bringing up to an OT network, combining that, working with an IT network solution. And all of a sudden I have real-time visibility on all the equipment that's happening on the manufacturing floor. And there's a bunch of different softwares that will plug into that, from MES to SCADA to ERP. But what's really exciting about that is we can drive better productivity out of existing infrastructure that's on the floor without having to invest millions of dollars in new physical assets.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing that I always tell manufacturers, to say, hey, we want to grow, we want to be more, we want to do better. I say, what can you do with what you have now, but digitalizing it?
Right.
What manual processes are you using in Excel that should not be being done in Excel?
I'm glad that you said that. We talk about how bad Excel is every time, because of course we are, we have a manufacturing software. So and a lot of our customers are coming from Excel. Like that's just the way it is, right?
Exactly. Did you ever watch Scooby-Doo when you were growing up, and they capture the villain and they pull off the mask? and so the meme or the comic is, when I talk to manufacturers and say, hey, what manufacturing software do they have? I say, we have manufacturing software. And I pry a little bit more. What is your manufacturing software? And I pull up the hood. I take off the mask. And there's Excel. And I'm like, that's not manufacturing software, And so trying to get these companies to understand that while Excel got you somewhere, it's not the tool
Yeah.
that you need to be using to drive productivity on the floor.
Yeah.
It's not a software that's scalable. It's not a software that allows you as a company to really have the interaction with the human that needs to happen on the floor. Right. If I'm going out there, I want to be able to understand, why is my first shift 27% more productive than my second shift? Why are these workers here better trained on running this equipment than these workers over here? How can I better understand the data that's being presented in front of me to be more productive? And I think at the end of the day, that's where we're seeing more and more companies. And that's what I was doing after I left my job at Industrial Control, working for the automation distributor. I went to go work for a systems integrator for 3 years. And so that's what we really helped companies on, was modernizing existing infrastructure on the floor, digitalizing their manufacturing processes, helping roll out manufacturing software that's really designed to, one, be a very good ROI when it comes to already leveraging existing assets, but making them smarter, being able to take data and do something with the data.
Right.
I think that's the other biggest struggle. Is a lot of times manufacturers say, well, I have all the data I want, I just don't know what to do with it. Being able to go out there and get data and create actionable data,
leverage that data
is really what we're seeing, manufacturers doing. So what's standing the test of time, the equipment, but what's changing, digitalizing those processes to make it so companies can be a lot more productive on the floor.
What about customers' needs? Like we talked a lot about like how the industry itself is changing. What about customers? Have their needs been changing over the course of the last couple decades? Yeah,
this is a perfect segue from that conversation on digitalizing, right? When we come out of the pandemic in 2020, the supply chain was a mess, right? We didn't, to say it nice, it was a mess. We didn't know where things were being manufactured at the end of the day. We thought they were being manufactured here, but that was actually a part that was being then sourced from 1,000 miles away,
right?
That was being over here, that had to come here. It was a nightmare. So what we're seeing now coming from a lot of companies is more companies want to have better visibility on the entire supply chain that's coming in there. And that's why we're digitalizing so many stuff, right? Because we're going out there and we are a tier 1 automotive company. It's not that we just want to know where the tier 2 components are coming from. We want to know where are they getting their components from, because all of a sudden, if you go out there, we have a supply issue. There was the stories of, how there was like 20,000 cars at a GM lot that couldn't be shipped because of one little chip that they were missing,
Right.
So they were holding $80,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 cars back for a $12 chip.
Oh, Jesus.
Because of the supply chain issues.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing now is manufacturers want a lot more visibility on this entire supply chain. And I think as well as manufacturers and companies are a lot more, I would say, aware of the value that a person brings to the manufacturing floor, where I think for a lot of times humans were very much looked at as a number, rather than as an individual. And so what we're seeing now is companies they're leveraging and seeing the value of the importance of a human worker a lot more. And that's why we're seeing today more companies that are leveraging automation to retain the worker rather than replace it, right? We need to keep people in manufacturing. We're not trying to replace people out of manufacturing.
So what about like cost? I mean, something like the AI computer vision, what would something like that cost? Is it like cost prohibitive, or is it something that even small companies can even think about leveraging?
So it's really not cost prohibitive anymore. It's one of those things where I think the technology there, it goes back to robotics as well. You look at going back in the year 2000, you would have a robot 20 years ago cost $150,000, and today it would cost $45,000 just for the standard robot arm. Where we're seeing the biggest, I guess you could say, resistance is not enough skilled workers to deploy technology and solutions.
Right.
If we would have more people who knew how to coming out of high school and coming out of college who knew how to program robots, companies would be deploying automation at a much faster rate than what we are currently here in North America.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I look at it, the cost of the physical components themselves is not the prohibitor. It's the lack of expertise and experience that's preventing manufacturers from adopting technology.
Right. Okay.
So in 2020, you mentioned how you worked as a business development manager, and then that's also around the same time you started the Manufacturing Millennial. So was there one post or video that really changed the conversation or got unexpected traction?
Yeah, no, man, that was such a blur from what it was. And the fact is, from what I did in 2020 is why I'm having a conversation with you guys now at having a podcast in Toronto. I turned to LinkedIn as a platform to share what I was passionate about on sharing why manufacturing is important, to highlight the cool technology that we're using and really showcase how things are made. I think manufacturing is one of those industries that should be celebrated. It's helped so many companies grow to what they, countries and companies grow to what they are today. And so when I chose out to be the manufacturing millennial was one of those things where being a millennial in manufacturing, you had a hard time getting this next generation excited about the industry. So me being the millennial in manufacturing, that's how that tagline and that name came to be. But for me, why or what really took off at the manufacturing space for me choosing to perform that and keep going with the manufacturing millennial is people get excited about seeing how things are made. People get excited about hearing the successful stories of why manufacturing and why robotics and why automation and why digital technology is so important, and the success that it creates, the opportunities that it gives people and their careers to have a successful career, to live and work in manufacturing. I think it's one of those things that should be celebrated. It should be brought a lot more attention to. You always hear the stories about when I talk to manufacturers and they say, yeah, I started working for a manufacturer when I was 18 years old. I didn't go to college. I didn't go get a degree. And I went there, and with hard work and determination and asking the right questions and wanting to learn things, they started from a entry-level position to now they're an executive or a vice president in, $1 million company. And so for me, being able to leverage LinkedIn as a platform to share these stories, to share what manufacturing and technology could do. It's one of those things that just took off and turns out a lot of people liked what I shared.
Can you share more about the different kinds of opportunities that came your way since becoming the manufacturing millennial? And how did that shift your career or purpose?
Aside from this podcast.
Absolutely. For me, it was one of those things is I'm able to share a lot of stories and passion that I'm really, excited about, diving into. We'll talk about the advocacy and education, in a little bit. But for me, being able to go out there and share what I've learned for 20 years working in the industry on the success that manufacturers have had and also the failures that companies have had and sharing what we've learned for them, being able to go around and travel the world. I was in Germany last month for Automatica for a big event. A few weeks before that, I was in London for another automation event. Later this fall, I'm going to be going to hopefully Taiwan and then back to Japan for a couple of big robotics manufacturing shows happening this fall. It's just being able to go out there and get invited to go to these places and see what new technology is going out there. And then what I think the biggest value that I bring is humanizing what's happening, right? I come from I'm an engineer, but a lot of times engineers have a really hard time communicating the technical aspects of it to the everyday individual person. So for me, my goal is to bring manufacturing and automation to the everyday person and talk about the importance of why that matters. And then breaking down those barriers that a lot of times parents put into place on wanting to prevent their kids from going into this industry. Right. So for me, being able to do a lot of storytelling, doing a lot of speaking, going to 40 events a year.
That's a lot.
That is very awesome. That's very, very fun. Yeah, very cool.
It's super exciting. I mean, last week I was in Minneapolis and down in Chicago. Yeah, I mean, just being all over the place has been incredible. and being able to have all these stories, it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I mean, just hearing your stories now, you have so many like good stories to share with us. We're learning so much about these different kinds of robots and technologies.
It's incredible what robotics is doing these days.
So what kind of advice do you have for like small to medium-sized businesses that kind of want to start leveraging like social media, like LinkedIn, TikTok? Like, is there any, like, it's obviously really overwhelming.
That is my favorite question.
Oh yeah. Okay, perfect.
That's one of my favorite questions to be asked. When you look at the small to medium-sized manufacturers, right? We talked about it. 98.6% of manufacturers are small to medium-sized business that are located within their city. When you look at the employment that works in there, about 60 to 65% of the employment that's there is within a 30-mile radius of where those manufacturers located and where those people grew up. So when you look at the importance of what manufacturers should be doing through social media and engagement, they need to be engaging with their local community, and they need to be leveraging social media in a way that highlights their people and not necessarily showcases their product. I think a lot of times companies will turn to LinkedIn and just to showcase their line card. They'll go out there and they just say, hey, look what we make, look what we do, rather than saying, here's the problems that we're solving. Here's the people that we're working with. It's either the people who work for us or the people that we help. And showcasing those stories. And I think, making the industry a lot more relatable is what companies should be doing. So from a social media aspect, they need to be leveraging LinkedIn as a tool to tell their story and to tell their employees and people's story. You could talk about your product, but talk about how your product is solving a problem that's relatable, not just how we're better than our competition, because everyone talks about that. It's not what we're seeing now, especially when you look at the strategy from the general B2C aspect now. People are doing commercials completely differently. Like the influencer market that's out there, whether people like it or not, you go on that, like influencer marketing, the whole Sydney Sweeney thing right now, right?
Yeah.
That's B2C marketing, creating conversations, taking an influencer and creating a business strategy around it. And I think that's one of those things too, is you as a company need to make your leadership relatable and approachable to future workers and generations and also your customers. That's going to be really that. And social media, in my opinion, is probably the best place to do that. Yeah.
What about like types of content? Or is there like, does video work really well? Or is it like white papers, blogs? Like what, is there anything that you would?
Short form video content, I think is some of the best content that's out there. So like, for me, right, we're filming a podcast right now. You're going to find out that your best results from this podcast is not actually the podcast. It's the 60
reels and shorts,
60 to 90 second snippets that you're going to pull out of this that drives the greatest value. Because for us, we're a scrolling generation now. Yeah. And if you're not creating content that can be engaged through scrolling, you're not going to have people that are going to stop and watch a 10 to 15 minute video unless they specifically go to click on that to watch the video.
Right.
So the best option is I'm going to say something very, exciting and buzzwordy and pull you in and say, clickbaity.
The Excel.
Okay, there we go. Pull in pull the Excel thing out. And then, hey, you want the full conversation? Check out this full podcast with Jake. And I think that's what companies need to be doing as well, as they need to be going out there and they need to be showcasing, hey, here's a picture of a person working 35 years ago on a floor when they're just starting out, and here's some in leadership now. Or hey, check out what our board of directors looks like. We have both men and women on this board, where manufacturing is a very heavily, like 79% male dominated industry. If we have women leadership on our board, that's going to be more exciting to have than women want to be a part of an industry. In fact, if you looked at the statistics, if you had a 7% increase of women in manufacturing, that would solve our labor shortage issues. 7% increase in women working in manufacturing.
Okay.
So it goes back to if we can make our industry more relatable, more exciting, more opening to people, we're going to be pulling people in, and that's what you should be doing for content. You should be finding content that's going to be relatable to people. You're going to educate them, and then you're going to pull them in as a call to action.
Awesome. So, let's go a little bit beyond the factory floor and talk about your impact kind of, in the community and stuff. Yeah. So you do a lot of work with students who are actually studying to have careers in STEM.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved in that?
Oh man, so I was one of those students.
Okay.
At one point in time. So for
Right.
me, I was in high school. I did the first robotics program, FRC, for 4 years. Then I coached Lego League and a bunch of other competitions. And for me, it was one of those things. I was a band nerd as well, growing up. And for me, it was one of those things where I was able to learn a lot, have a passion, use my brain to solve problems, and then compete in a way that was really exciting on the field. And if you've never been to a first robotics competition, I would highly recommend it. You have 40 teams with 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 students there, driving around 120-pound robots, smashing into each other, competing on a game field that's half the size of a football field, with robots moving, 20, 30 kilometers per hour. It's like, they're cruising on a very short field.
Yeah.
And so for me, when we can go out there and we can see this next generation excited about robotics and excited about programming and learning, we need then to capture that enthusiasm and say, here's the career opportunities that exist for you when you graduate from high school. And so when you look at like 3D printers, right? A lot of people, if you don't have one, you probably know a friend that has a 3D printer. Well, a 3D printer is a piece of manufacturing equipment, right? You're going out there, you're either downloading a piece of CAD or a model, you're modifying that model, you're using some free software to build that model up. You're then creating software to then layer that model, create the supports, and then you're 3D printing it, and then you're finishing it, and then you have a product, right? So all of a sudden, you have kids who are middle school and high school working with a manufacturing process and say, hey, you already understand the fundamentals. Here's a great career for you. And so for me, being able to work with a future generation that can have so much promise and an opportunity to really be successful in that career, it's really exciting. So some of the stuff that we work with is, this year was my 20th year on being a part of First Robotics. In fact, if you actually look on my LinkedIn page, I have it tagged up there where I did a segment with ESPN, highlighting robotics. And that's one. The other things that we have in our area in West Michigan, which is why I think community is so important to manufacturing. What we do is we have 2 events. In the springtime, we have an event called My Career Quest. In the fall, we have an event called Discover Manufacturing. Between those 2 events, we connect about 20,000 middle school and high school students within a 30-mile radius of Grand Rapids directly to manufacturers to teach them about what career opportunities exist for them in manufacturing, from going right out of high school to work for them, through apprenticeships, through trade school programs, through 2-year college degrees, associate's degrees, to 4-year engineering programs. They can enter in working for manufacturing at any point in their career at whatever skill level they want to. And being able to go out there and say, hey, you can go and work for a manufacturer. You don't have to go to college and get $46,000 in student debt, which is the average debt that a person going to a public in-school thing in Michigan is right now, is graduating with like $40,000 in student debt. You don't need to do that. You don't need to be 24 years old and have $40,000 in debt to your name before you even get a job.
Yeah.
So going out there and being able to try and educate this generation to say, just because your parents say go to college, don't go to college unless you want to go for a degree that's valuable to you.
Right.
And don't go to college just to go to college and put yourself in debt. You're setting yourself up for failure, not necessarily failure,
wasting
but,
time too if you don't
for
want to do it.
For the next 10 years, you're not going to enjoy paying off that debt. So if we can go out there and we can educate this next generation about what value manufacturing has and these jobs that have, is really important. But also, it's great to then work with all the companies locally and really start change the culture and the mindset these older generations have that have been in the industry for decades, and say, listen, you need to engage with the next generation to get people excited about that. The job reversals have switched. In fact, when you look at you have a hiring manager, you have leadership that hires people. A lot of times, if you were hiring someone on your team, you might go on their Facebook page or their Twitter page or their Instagram page and say, who's this person that we're interviewing? You're gonna look up their name, you're gonna see on Facebook, where are they from? Where are they going to do in that? That was just a practice. Whether you should be doing it or not is a question. But that's what every hiring manager did. Well, here's the thing though. Now 80% of Gen Zs, which is the generation that's graduating from high school right now, will go on a company's social media page and look at their pages, look at their hiring managers' pages before they even go into that job interview. So now all of a sudden what we're discovering in manufacturing is it's no longer the hiring manager interviewing the individual to come and work for the company.
Yeah.
Now it's the individual saying, hey, company, why should I come to work for you when there's 14 other companies that also want to hire me, who offer maybe better benefits, or I don't have to work on a manufacturing floor and work in a metal recycling facility that's dealing with, a bunch of broken glass beer bottles and cans and plastic, right? Why should I go work for you? Well, instead of saying, hey, you're gonna be around the floor in 100-degree weather all day, oh, you're gonna come out here and you learn how to do robotics. We're gonna pay you a lot better than just doing manual labor because you're doing a much more valuable skilled job. And you can take those career assets and you can go where you need to go in 5 years. So it's one of those things is we're seeing a shift on why we're hiring, how we need to hire, and being able to connect the next generation with the employers, and then the employers with the next generation, understanding what those young students are looking for is really critical.
So you've built a few robots yourself that you've shared on social media. One was a robot dog, and another one, which is my personal favorite, which is a beer delivery robot dog.
Yes. So the quadruped robot, so the base robot itself is actually from a company called Unitree.
Okay.
So they manufacture that dog robot, but I have 6 of those dog robots.
Okay.
I have 6 of them, and so that's part of the tool where you bring them to trade shows, bring them to events, bring them to schools to get excited about robotics.
You're bringing the beer one to school?
No, I did bring a ping pong ball shooter one though.
Oh, that
to
one.
my girls' classroom. So they really love that. I'll try and get that. If you have links, I'll have make sure there's a link in the comment below. But I have the robot that turned into a giant 6-foot walking spider for Halloween.
Wow.
I have the robot shooting fireworks. I had the beer delivery robot. I have the robot with a leaf blower that's cleaning my yard and making my yard.
So if there's ever an uprising in the robots, you're screwed essentially.
Well, no, see, I'm an early adopter, so they're gonna remember I'm their friend. That's
true.
I'll be in the club. I'll be invited to the robot's backyard, barbecue party. When they take over the world. But yeah, so using those robots is a lot of fun, and it's a great way to create conversations. Get kids excited. I mean, we did an event a couple months ago where we brought a bunch of robots to the local Chick-fil-A. One of our friends is one of the managers at the Chick-fil-A restaurant. And it was one of those things is, hey, come to Chick-fil-A. Kids eat free on Tuesday nights. And then we had the robots out there where the kids could drive. We could have conversations and just talk with parents about here's what robots means in the 21st century today and what you could be doing with them.
Yeah. I mean, you listed a lot, but is there anyone that's like the coolest automation showcase that you've ever done?
That specifically with robot dogs?
Yeah. Well, it could be any automation,
anything you've seen.
Anything.
I can't talk about it.
Stay tuned.
There's a lot of things that are out there that
NDA.
I've worked on that we can't talk about, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not safe for work or just a
NDA, maybe.
Yeah,
Secret.
NDA, okay.
So stay tuned. Follow Jake for future.
Stuff, yeah. There's robotic stuff that we worked on that go up into space and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Very cool. Okay.
It's fun. It's fun things. One day.
Yeah,
one day. Yeah, but what I can't talk about, honestly, working with that robot dog is fun. I think that for the 4th of July, mounting 12 bottle rockets on, 12 Roman candles on it, and then lighting it off over my lake, for the 4th of July.
Yeah.
That's about the most American.
I think your younger version of you would probably just have a single tear knowing that was going to happen. Yeah.
As the American lighting off fireworks on the 4th of July, that's, if you're in Canada listening to this, yes, that's that's stereotypical American, eating our burger, lighting fireworks off a lake off of a robot dog. America.
So Jake, you're constantly on the move, attending all these different conferences, expos, and industry events. So what's that experience like, and what keeps you coming back all the time?
For me, it's about community. It's being able to go out there and, going to 200 events in the last 5 years. You really get to meet some really cool people in the industry, and you can share a lot of cool stories. And for me, being able to go to events allows me to really keep my pulse on what's happening in the industry, knowing what companies are doing new technology, leveraging results, and seeing what new technology is available. I think that's one of the coolest things. You go to trade shows, you're able to see videos of things happening. But for me, I want to be able to capture footage and then showcase to my audience on what technologies featured if people can't make it to the trade show. So every trade show I go to, I always shoot a recap video that, gets
awesome.
hundreds of thousands of views, showcasing all the different robots and technology that go to. But for me, people, I think it's one of those things at the end of the day, while we work in a digital world filled with automation, robotics, AI, and technology, at the end of the day, what matters most is the people that you work with. And so what will drive success for the companies who are either making these solutions or leveraging the solutions on the floor is how do they work with the people that are around there. And I think that's that's what would drive success is how people friendly do you make your product to work with at the end of the day, if it's to integrate, if it's to use, if it's to sell, at the end of the day, people is what matters. And I think that's what makes me most excited about the industry right now is people is very much like the front of mind conversation when anything else is being implemented or being invented. People are always what they're thinking about first, not necessarily what they're thinking about as the last thing and the result of it.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah.
So with all of these events, what are some emerging trends that standing out the most right now?
Yeah, I mean, to summarize it, I would say we're definitely in the world of AI and robotics right now. I think it's the big thing. AI is really impacting every area of manufacturing, from the data that we look with, from the machine vision to the human guidance, from the digital work instructions to robotics. We're really seeing AI being the impactful. But I would say, the one thing is we're seeing manufacturing becoming a digital solution and really a digital trend. I look at when another story, right? When I bought my first car, it was a 1996 Ford F-250. So we got it off of the auction lot, and my dad brought me to AutoZone, and we got a Haynes repair manual. If you don't know what that is, it's like a 200-page black and white paper cover book that basically has all the different ways that you can fix a car, from replacing the brakes to the alternator, the spark plug, timing belt, anything you need to replace a car. Now, fast forward 20 years, and we use YouTube, right? So how we solved things 20 years ago is we had paper-based work instructions on how to learn and solve things. Now we have YouTube. 20 years ago, you had your grandma's Betty Crocker cookbook. Right. Today, you have TikTok and Pinterest and Instagram that you're
like
learning.
saving the recipes. That's what I do.
Yeah, you're learning. So it's one of those things is we are now living in a fully digital mindset of how we learn, how we live. Manufacturers need to adopt that mindset as well. And I think that's what we're seeing is just everything's becoming digital. Everything, instead of creating work instructions on on 4 or 5 pages, we're recording a video, we're recording a screen, we're doing a voiceover. That's how people learn these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something that we're actually hearing a lot about too, not just AI. I think every episode we talk about AI now, or COVID.
Yeah.
The supply chain is disruption. Exactly. So COVID always comes up, and then AI is always coming up. But we also talk a lot about sustainability. So I was kind of wondering, how is that working in the manufacturing world? Are manufacturers doing any sort of initiatives to try and become greener?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I was actually talking with a trade show happening in Las Vegas. I try and keep politics out of everything. So a lot of times people say, it's just a political push from one political party or another. Sustainability does have a lot of actual benefits from a cost perspective to driving profitability. So I think it's one of those things where it's important to have initiatives, but it has to happen organically.
Right.
You can't push it to happen on its own if the consumer doesn't want it.
Right.
Like for me, for example, this is my persona. When I'm over in Germany, I love the water bottles where the cap doesn't come off the thing all the way.
I love those too. It's a small thing, but
people say they hated the idea of it, but I'm like, I love the fact that I just can do it and I just can have it all in one hand and drink it. But that's a sustainable initiative to keep recycling. So it's one of those things where if the invention there makes sense. Here's another great one. So there's a company in Ogden, Utah called Pack Size. And they make it where if you order a product on Amazon, it gets shipped to your door. A lot of times you've probably at one point in time got a package where the box was 100 times larger than the item that you purchased. And it was filled with, 90%, wadded up paper or just a bunch of those, air bubble bags.
Yeah.
Well, what pack size is doing is they're taking it so you can take a product, you put it on a conveyor belt, it'll scan the dimensions of it, and then it will cut and fold that piece of cardboard to the exact dimensions of the product that you're shipping. Fully automated. So now all of a sudden, you as a user are not having to worry about where you're going to put all this cardboard that got shipped to you and how are you going to get it thrown away or recycled because the box is way too big. It's a lot cheaper to ship because the box is the actual size of it. You're not shipping
not just air.
You're not shipping 80% air. And it's one of those things too. It's cheaper, it's easier to ship, and then the end user likes it as well because I don't have to deal with as much waste.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win-win. A great focus on what a great sustainable technology could be, for the industry.
So what about, our last guest actually mentioned that exact company too, which is interesting because
Really?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go look that up. What episode is that gonna be?
It's
one
the one
before,
before you.
17.
17.
So this is 18.
17,
Okay.
yeah.
Throwback
So-
to episode 17.
But something else that he actually mentioned was that I was getting huge buzz about 5 years ago. I think he said it was lights out warehousing.
Yeah.
So basically, warehouses that are completely done autonomously, no humans in the warehouse. It's just all robots. And now they've kind of shifted away from that notion and they're now seeing that, using technology and humans collaboratively is more the way to go. So what do you see for the future of manufacturing? Do you see it more of the same like that?
Yeah, the whole lights out was a big push. I think we found out that humans can do a lot more than what we originally thought robots could replace for.
Yeah.
And so what we are seeing now less of a fully 100% automated process. We're finding out how can humans stay in the work and automation can do 90%. And then the humans can do that last 10% that would cost double the cost of automation.
Right.
So a lot of times when we're looking at the cost of automation, you can pay for a system. Let's just say it's gonna cost $100. I'm doing very low cost terms here, right? It's gonna cost $100 to put this item in a box and tape it. It would cost you then $300 to put the item in the box, tape it, and make sure the label was perfectly straight. So or would you rather just have a human put that label on at the end of it? So it goes back to the whole entire thing of we can automate everything, but at what cost does the ROI not make sense anymore?
Right.
I think a great quote from Elon Musk. I know he's all over the news a lot of times, but one of the things that he had when working at Tesla was he said the human worker is extremely underestimated with the value that they can bring to the manufacturing floor. Because originally when they tried to put in the Gigafactory, they tried to automate everything in the robotics. And they had the opportunity to because they were a greenfield facility. They didn't have a lot of the boundaries and walls that a lot of the existing automotive places had for decades. But they found out really quickly that some things, it just makes sense to have a human worker.
Right.
And I think that's what we're seeing as well is there's that lights out focus, but at the end of the day, you can't light out everything. You still need the human in there. And the focus is how do you then make sure that human brings as much value and you have that, you give, I guess you could say you give value to that human for the job that they have, where they're not just doing the boring, repetitive tasks.
Okay, so before we wrap up the episode, we're going to talk a little bit about, one of your passions, which is modernizing the industry and attracting the next generation. So what would you give? Like, what kind of advice would you give to manufacturers who are trying to attract, the Gen Zs, the Millennials into the industry?
Yeah, I'll take this as the call to action. For me, I would say the first one is you need to get involved with your community. If you're a manufacturer and you are out there and you're complaining about having a labor shortage and you're complaining about not being able to get the talents that you need on the floor, you need to be engaging with the local workforce, with the local community. If that's either the high schools, if that's the tech career programs, the local colleges or universities, if you are as a manufacturer not engaged with the education side, that needs to happen. There needs to be a better collaboration between education and industry. So that would be my first call to action is find a way to get involved with local schools, bring kids in, have them walk on the floor, have them see how things are being made in their backyard. I think one of the biggest things, and that's why I love showing what I do on video all the time is because a lot of times, last week was National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day.
Chocolate chip cookie.
I missed it.
You missed it, but I shared a video on how a collaborative robot was taking cookie dough that was coming out of a dispenser that was making the right size, ball, plopping it on a tray, and it was going out there and it was palletizing, palleting, whatever that word would be. It's dispensing, a sheet of 24 cookies on a baking tray. And then it takes that baking tray, puts it in a rack that will eventually go into the oven, and then grabs another tray and does it, right? So you have, people love chocolate chip cookies. I mean, people love cake, people love food.
Yeah.
So if I can show and say, hey, here's a really cool task on how a robot is making something that you consume and you eat every day, people are like, oh, that's really cool. That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
That's what manufacturers need to be doing. They need to be showcasing why what they do matters to the industry, to the people, and the community around it.
Right. I love that. What about like platforms? Are there any does like LinkedIn work better, or is it TikTok? I mean, all the young kids are on TikTok. So
it's one of those things, right? It's who's your market? Who are you talking to?
Okay.
For me, I leverage LinkedIn because I'm much more of a B2B type of person. But if you're out there and you're a manufacturer and you're making products that go directly to consumers, absolutely you should be on where consumers are leveraging, which is going to be Instagram, which is going to be Facebook, which is going to be YouTube Reels, TikTok. That's where you should be. You should be on those platforms to not even necessarily talk about your product, just be a brand that's relatable and recognizable. If you're going out there and you're a manufacturer that's making work gloves, go out there and show how your work gloves. Go out there and try and get your work gloves as dirty and gross as they can be, and show that they work, and find a way that is leveraging memes to go out there and say, go out there and get one of your workers instead of, Sydney Sweeney saying, I have great jeans, I have great gloves,
lean into the meme.
Lean into it. And I think that's why it's so important though, for you as a manufacturer to adopt and hire a younger generation, because a 40-year-old person in the office has no idea if I went out there and I tried to recreate an American Eagle jeans commercial with gloves. Yeah. But if I go out there and I have work gloves and do it, you have a really good story to do.
Yeah, that's a great. We should do that actually.
And it goes out there. It's you're making your brand and your story relatable to an audience, and that's what brings people in.
What about, are there any mistakes that you see companies making when it comes to their social presence?
When they just talk about their product all the time. No one cares about their product. No one cares about a line card. No one cares about a product that doesn't solve a problem. So for me, I think it's one of those things where be people oriented, product second.
Yeah. Do you know of any companies that, can you give us an example of a company who's doing it right? You're wow, they are doing an awesome job. People are really gravitating towards them.
For me, I think Pack Size was a fun one, because they're going out there and they're just randomly boxing up random items.
Oh, I love that.
And showcase hey, here's a Tickle Me Elmo, and or here's a Miss Rachel. If you have kids, who Miss Rachel is, a Miss Rachel, toy, putting it in there and then boxing it up. It makes it relatable. I think that's why you got to stay connected to current events, because the industry and the stories move so quickly, but you can really get it excited. I went up there and I posted my TikTok, a TikTok video with my robot leaf blower. And it got, I think, 17 million views on TikTok.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very relatable topic, though.
But it was one of those things. I was using one of the current songs that was
trending
at the time to get trending.
Right.
And so, if you understand the current trends and stuff like that, you're going to have a lot of success.
Yeah.
So, if a company can only change one thing to modernize, where would you recommend they start?
That's a tough question.
One thing.
If they could change one thing to modernize,
you can say death to Excel if you want, or just we like talking trash about Excel around here.
I was going to say it's probably paper-based work instructions and paper-based information. If you could leverage and make the way people learn, communicate, and process information digitally, you're going to have probably the best results. I would say that if companies could modernize one thing, it would be removing the manual paper-based data collection information and bringing it to a digital platform.
Lastly, what's one thing you want every manufacturer to remember as they plan for the future?
You'll never be productive without your people.
People first.
I think it's one of those things is with whatever you do, focus on how will it drive opportunity and success with people who are currently on your manufacturing floor, and then who will eventually come and work for you one day. I think
I love that.
people
That's
orientation is what matters.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, especially if you're trying to attract new talent,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's all about the culture.
Yeah.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you so much, Jake, for being here and giving us a nice behind the scenes look at all the manufacturing things going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much. We learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners did too.
Oh man, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And before we let you go, can you tell us about what's next for you? Are there any upcoming shows or anything you want
man.
to plug in?
For me, I think the biggest thing that I would say is go to a show
Yeah.
or a conference. And if I'm there, please stop by and see me. I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories. So reach out to me on social media, on LinkedIn as well. I will try and get back to your message on LinkedIn. I get about 200 messages
Wow.
a day. So it's a little tough, but I do read them all. And if there's anything I can do to help people out in the industry, let me know.
Awesome. And if you liked today's episode, please give us a like, subscribe, share, do all the things, give us a 5-star review. And as Jake mentioned, all of the links will be down below.
Definitely go follow Jake, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye, everybody.